Good morning, everyone. My name is Heather Kinsey, and I'm with the Strive Group in Anchorage, Alaska. Thanks for joining us today. We are doing weekly or daily webinars regarding managing disruption during the COVID-19 times that we find ourselves in. And this may be your first time joining us today, or it may be a multiple webinar you've popped in on. So either way, thank you. Again, my name is Heather Kinsey, and I'm with the Strive Group. Today we have Jonathan King. Jonathan's topic, as I put on the slide here, is focus and fire. And of course, he'll work through really what he means by that. Monday's topic is public relations and communications. And then Tuesday, we'll be back with business insurance. So you can always visit thestrivegroup.com for our daily schedule. Currently, we are scheduled up until about April 22nd, 23rd, I believe is the last programming that we have determined at this moment, but we're adding them every day, and we fully expect to continue to offer these daily webinars through at least mid-April or mid-May or beyond. Feel free to submit questions if you're live with us right now. You can submit questions to Jonathan on the right-hand side of your screen. That's known as the chat function. We are moderating that as Jonathan goes through his webinar. If you're viewing this after this, so you're watching it on playback, you will not have the chat function enabled. However, you will be able to email Jonathan directly. The very last slide is Jonathan's contact information, and I am positive he will welcome any questions that you have regarding this topic, and he'll respond to you directly. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan. Again, this is Jonathan King from Halcyon Consulting. He is based here in Anchorage, Alaska with us. Jonathan.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you for the great introduction. So right now today, we're going to be talking about the feeling that the world is on fire, right? We're under assault at the moment from multiple fronts. Many of us are locked in our houses. Our business lives have been disrupted. Our work lives have been disrupted, and we're all juggling multiple things. So in this moment of disruption, chaos, and uncertainty, it can feel literally that the world is on fire and that everything is out of control. And how do we maintain our focus in these moments and really make sure that we're still getting the best out of ourselves, or trying to do the best that we can? If typical life is like riding a bicycle down the sidewalk, then today feels like riding that bicycle during the Tour de France while someone is simultaneously conducting the 24 hours at Le Mans right next door. It can be absolutely overwhelming. And in my coaching business, I'm seeing more and more leaders that are really struggling to deal with the pace at which COVID-19 is changing the way that they do business, the challenges that they're having, and also the feelings that they're just overwhelmed. So today's seminar is really focused on establishing and maintaining that feeling of focus and accomplishment while investing in your resiliency in moments, not just in this moment, but in moments that are like this one. So when you leave here today, you're going to have some tools that you can use on an hourly, daily, or weekly basis to help you stay focused and establish really a Zen-like state that helps you move forward. As we start to move through this, one place that I really want to start is by helping you understand why it feels so overwhelming in the moment. And that really has to do with the structure of our brain. Our brain structure is deeply rooted in our evolution on the savannas of Africa. For eons, our brains were trained to prioritize safety from predators, large herbivores, and anything that could cause us significant issues. So including the threat from other tribes, poisonous critters, whatever you have it. So our ancestors who had this ability to consistently and effectively check for safety ended up passing along those genes to us, while those that didn't have that ability, well, they didn't make it that far. But one of the leftovers for us as individuals is that 75% of the primitive portion of our brain, what's known as the amygdala, is actually dedicated to threat response and mitigation. So a significant portion of your most primitive part of your brain is constantly assessing, am I safe? And in today's moment, and with the pressures that are going on with COVID-19, the answer, of course, that's coming through is perhaps not. When we're stressed, this part of our brain takes over. It becomes the default pilot for most of us. That means that results in us being more anxious, means we're less creative, and we exhibit poor decision making. So we need to engage our higher brain in times like this. And neuroscience research shows that we're significantly smarter and better at decision making when we're able to engage that higher part of our brain. There's a great TED Talk out there by Sean Achor from Harvard University that talks about the importance of being happy at work and how powerful it can be, and the fact that we're 30 to 40% smarter and perform better on tasks when we're in a positive frame of mind. So one of the things that I want you to do now is to sit down as you're listening to this or participating, is to sit down and write down 3 things that are going well for you today. What's working well? What do you have gratitude about? And I'm going to pause for a second so that you can write those down. And I'm going to do it myself and write down my 3 things that I'm feeling a little bit of gratitude about today. All right. So as we've done that, what feelings arose for you, right? What feelings happened for you as you were writing these things down? The 3 things that I came up with today are: I looked outside this morning, and yes, we're here in Anchorage, Alaska, where it is spring, but that still means that it's white on the ground outside. And I looked outside this morning, and we had gotten about 4 inches of new snow. And as I looked out the back of my house this morning, all of the pine trees were covered with a lovely coating of brand new white snow. It was absolutely beautiful. I read this morning an article about a new vaccine for COVID-19 that the University of Pittsburgh is working on, and how that had been effective and how they were advancing that in trials. And I thought, that's really good news. I'll take that. And the other thing that I'm deeply grateful for in this moment is the fact that I get to participate in this webinar. It's not a have to, it's a get to. It breaks up my schedule, and that lets me express a little bit different energy than I might normally get to express in the day. So by writing these down and voicing them, and I would like you to voice them as I'm speaking, voice them at your desk or wherever you're watching this from. Voice those things after having written them down. When you write them and when you voice them, you solidify that feeling in your mind. And so take a moment and ask yourself, how do you feel in this moment compared to how we felt before we started the webcast? My guess is that perhaps you're feeling a little calmer and a little more focused before. And this is a technique that we can use to kind of tamp down the fire of what's around us and start to focus in on ourselves. Now we get to the idea of, who do I need to be to settle the ball? Well, what is settling the ball? Well, if you're in the United States and you watch someone playing soccer, or if you're in the rest of the world and you're watching them play football, there's a very basic move that's called settling the ball. And it's that moment when the ball arrives at a player and they take just a millisecond to make sure that that ball is in control. They don't hack at it. They don't just kick at it wildly. They actually take a moment to settle it with their foot, their leg, their chest, or their head. And then they almost simultaneously transition to focusing on what their next move is going to be. So what do you need to do to settle the ball within your own life? What habits do you need to use? What mood do you need to be in to really help create that focus? And really, who do you need to be to kind of settle into that ball and get ready to move those things? For me, the very first thing is to go through an exercise like this gratitude exercise. It grounds me in my day. It helps me set that positive frame of mind. And it really gets me ready for the actual act of settling the ball. So now let's talk about settling the ball, and we'll move on to the next slide. So when we settle that ball, we
Jonathan, can I
yes,
interrupt for
ma'am.
just 1 second? We have a
Go
question from a
ahead.
viewer.
Lovely.
We have a question from the viewer, and it was particularly about this inventory, this idea of taking inventory of what's going well. And the question is, how many times a day during times of crisis would you recommend them doing this? Is it just an every morning thing to start their day? Or would you recommend them sort of scheduling time, like meetings with themselves, for lack of a better phrase, every other hour, at midday, again at dinner time? What's your intuition telling you for how many times they
So
should do it?
there's no one size fits all here. Every and I want to thank the viewer for that question. There is no one size fits all when it comes to an exercise like a gratitude exercise. You can do it as frequently or as often as you find it effective. For me, I will use it once in the morning, and I may use it during the day if I find myself particularly stressed. And what you're doing is you're just activating that part of yourself that says, I'm still here. Everything's okay. In this moment, I'm still here and everything is okay. So you can schedule these breaks. You can also use them in unscheduled time. I would say early in the morning, it's a great habit to have as you start your day. It can also be a great habit at the end of the day to reinforce that feeling of I accomplished something. And it can take a slightly different form at the end of the day where we say, what did I get done today? What wins do I need to celebrate? It's going to put you in the same frame of mind. So, great question from the audience there. You can use this tool as often as you see fit and see how it works for you. It really is not a one size fits all thing. The awesome question. Keep those coming. Let's talk about how to prioritize and how to settle that ball so that you can then transition into being as effective as possible. So, how do you prioritize when everything feels urgent and everything feels important and everything feels like it's in motion? Well, the first thing to do is to really define the problem, right? Which is to list out what needs to be done or what could be done in that day and all the places that you could be spending your time and energy. The thing that we all have in common is that there's 24 hours in the day. It's the great leveler in the world. And we all face this choice about how we want to spend our time. Now, I will tell you, I had a great Monday. I was very productive. I had a great Wednesday. I was very productive. What a Tuesday was not so productive. What was the difference between Monday and Wednesday and then Tuesday? And I will tell you that the only difference in those days in reality was I didn't take the time on Tuesday to really settle the ball and to list out the things that I could need to get done. It seems really basic, but when you wake up in the morning, the world is your oyster. You can do anything, and that can be overwhelming when you've got 100 emails. But if you sit down and list the things that you need to do, you're going to put some bounds around your day, and it's going to create a universe around which you can control. Now, the next question is, what do I control? What do I influence? And really, what we're asking here is, what do I not control? And what do I not have influence over? If you have things on your list that you don't have control over and you don't have influence over, guess what? They're just taking up space. They have the potential to take up energy. We're just going to scratch those right off the list, right? We're going to take care of those and we're going to get rid of them. We're going to take them right off the list. So just take a moment right now and think about your list for today and think, is there anything here that I don't control, that I don't have influence on, and I'm just going to kick them. They just don't, they might be important. They're certainly, worthwhile, but not going to be spending my time on them, right? Going to send them out there. Now, once you have that kind of purified list of things that you can control and you can influence, I want you to think about one of those things that you can accomplish today. What's the thing that if you get done today, that no matter what, that you can look back and say, I got that done? Now, some would argue that we should focus on our most important task first, or we should focus on our hardest task first, and that may be the case. in certain circumstances. But I think there's a lot of value in, particularly when we talk about long periods of time, about being able to regularly say, I got this done today. That's a win. I can check that off. So, what is it that's on your list that are some quick hits that you can ensure that no matter what happens, that you can get at least one or two of those things done and you can look back and say, aha, I got this, right? These were important. Now, we start to ask slightly weightier questions here when we get to what's going to make a difference, right? And this is about prioritizing. What is it that I can touch that is going to make a difference either for me, for my direct reports, for my boss, right? The person I report to, for my team. What is it that really is going to make a difference where perhaps I'm on the critical path and I need to get myself out of somebody else's critical path, or I need to move something down the field, right? Which of these tasks on this list am I going to be able to make a difference? And then the last question that we ask ourselves is, what's important now? When? What's on our list is important now? And we just make little tick marks next to our list about, what's important now. And all of a sudden the picture starts to become clear about what's important now and what we need to do in order to, prioritize our list and make sure that we're really getting something out of our day. And it seems very simple. Heather, yes, it appears we have a question from the audience. What do we have?
You do. It's actually, it's a combination question and observation. So the question, the observation is it seems as if Jonathan is talking about good time management. And I would assume that you are. But then the actual question is, how does a leader encourage and or mentor or guide his or her workforce to action, to focus and or I'm making some assumptions based on the quick typing, but I think that what they're asking is, how does the leader encourage the workforce to actively do these things too, right? So instead of just saying, hey, you need to do X, Y, or Z, what does it look like when you're encouraging a workforce to do what you yourself perhaps are even struggling to do? And that's taking the time to do the items up here on your slide.
Yeah, so this is great because this does, in essence, come down to one of the things that we could boil this down to is it is about strong time management, right? But it's more than that because we're not blocking out specifically using this technique times. We're just parameterizing our day and making sure that we're actually feeding our brain's need for a little bit of structure, a little bit of calm, and some wins at the end of the day. And that's going to become a little more apparent as we get to the next slides, because this is about how good habits really can help sustain you over the long term, right? Now, if you're a leader and you just drop this in front of your direct reports, right, that may not be a way to get this habit ingrained in them. So the first thing I believe is that weather always starts from the top, right? Is that if you're a leader and you expect your people to use this, then you need to be using it yourself, right? Is that you need to be practicing it. They need to see you practice it. They need to see it up on your whiteboard. They need to know how to do it. And you need to be in charge of enculturating that. Now, one way that you can enculturate it and make sure that that happens is to you can have your team leaders hold little quick huddle meetings, campfire meetings, whatever you want to call them in the morning, where individual unit teams sit down and kind of walk through some of these questions and say, what are our priorities for today? What are the quick hits? What are the wins that we can get, right? And then it becomes part of that team. So that's how leaders can help enculturate it. As always, the weather starts at the top. So don't just hand it to them and expect them to do it. Actually lead them by example and create the structure that makes it part of your culture. All right, I want to give you another tool here. This is an oldie but a goodie. Many of you may have seen a version of this. This is called the Eisenhower Matrix. It's named after President Dwight David Eisenhower, and he was famed for his productivity. And this, when people are really stuck uh, about how to prioritize, this is the tool that I use in coaching when someone's just really stuck. And so here's how the Eisenhower Matrix works. The first thing you do is that you list all of the things that you could do today. Okay. Then once that list is exhausted, you've completely filled out that list, you've struck off the things that are outside of your control or outside of your influence, then you're down to the things that you can truly do during the day. Then I have them uh, rate each item on the list on the basis of importance and urgency. And you can use a 1 to 5 scale, you can use a 1 to 10 scale, right? You just make sure that you use the same scale for both of them. You can even say important, not important, urgent, not urgent. And then we set up this matrix that looks like this, and we can actually have them plot into these quadrants where their items on their list falls. And so then it becomes very clear that the things that we're focusing on today are those that are urgent and important, the things you need to do. If it's urgent but not important that somebody else can do where you're not going to add any special sauce to doing it, then you delegate that. And you go through a good delegation process to make sure that that's done. That's the lower left-hand quadrant on the visual that you're seeing. If it's not urgent, but it's important, in other words, it's not breathing down your neck, we want to keep that from ever getting really to that uber urgent box. For those, we plan, how am I going to execute this? Where does it fit in my priority list? We do that. If it's not urgent and it's not important, goes in the parking lot, right? It gets eliminated. Do I ask myself, do I really need to be doing this? Does it need to get done? Does it need to be on my list? We try to get rid of those. It's a very effective tool, okay? Now, the one rule I will say is if you're working with someone or you're doing this yourself is not everything can be important. Not everything can be urgent. So put some parameters about what it means to be urgent. Is urgent, got to get it done today, got to get it done this morning, this afternoon, got to get it done this week. Okay, and then really ask yourself, where does this lie within that, right? And be honest about the difference between important and I want to do it or somebody else wants me to do it. Heather, do we have any questions before we move on to the next slide? No. Okay, so let's keep
Well,
this going.
I don't think there are any questions. I just wanted to make an observation that I've been using that Eisenhower Matrix since, gosh, I think since even in college. I mean, it's been a really long time. It's definitely a tried and true thing. And I appreciate that it's often forgotten about. And so when we are disrupted, whether we're disrupted in our personal life or our professional life, sometimes it's good to go back to, as you said, an oldie but a goodie, right? We find comfort in it. It works. It's tried and true. And so I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, Heather, I appreciate that. What do you need to make the Eisenhower Matrix work? You need a piece of paper and a pencil, right? The simplest things, a whiteboard, whatever you got, you can make that work. You can use the back of an envelope and make that work. It does not have to be high tech. There's a beauty around keep it simple, stupid. And Heather, if we can just go back to that slide for a minute, I want to make one little point before we do the staying running in the marathon. I want to point out that you don't have to limit yourself to importance and urgency. That's the traditional Eisenhower matrix. You can put down things like urgency and bang for the buck, or how much bang you're going to get from it versus how much effort it's going to take to get there. There's all sorts of different versions that you can use here. Very flexible tool. And like I said, all you need, pen and paper. All right. COVID-19, this disruption, this is going to be a marathon, right? Let's just accept the fact this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And I think that's becoming increasingly apparent to people because the adrenaline of last week, the week before, if this is your third or fourth week of being in your house, such as it is, here Here in Anchorage, my wife and I have children. This is our fourth week of being in the house together and working out of the house. We've probably got another 8 weeks to go of something like this at a minimum. So this is about a marathon, not about a sprint. Okay, we talked very early on about the amygdala, about that primitive brain. How do we keep that in check? How do we keep that from making us feel anxious, making bad decisions, right? It is about making sure that you invest in your resiliency. We invest in our resiliency by focusing on nets, nutrition, exercise, training, and sleep. All of these things, good nutrition, regular exercise, going for a walk, going for a run, yoga, any of those things, skiing, right? If you can still do it, even exercises in your house, they're all going to contribute to the healthiness of your brain. Okay. When we talk about training, what we're really talking about here is mindfulness training of the brain, and that takes many different forms. It can be alone time, it can be a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice, it can be prayer, um, it can be standing in the shower for that matter. It's that time that you set aside for yourself that helps you renew, that strengthens your brain, that allows you to relax and lets those creative thoughts come forward. And then lastly, we have sleep. Most adults need 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Most Americans don't get that. Sleep is Good quality sleep is absolutely critical to resiliency and critical to running the marathon. So I want you to ask yourself in this moment, where could you do just one step better on one of these? I know for me that getting out and exercising right now with us working out of our house, those daily walks, absolutely positively critical. And there's several times a day where I will just take the opportunity to step outside my door and be outside, right? And that sleep also absolutely critical for me. So for you, the question I would ask you is what's critical for you? Where can you make one step improvement? All right, as we transition it into our last slide, disruption doesn't mean doom, okay? There's an opportunity in this crisis for you somewhere. There's an opportunity for you to change your business, invest in your skill set, reach out to someone who's out there. You know, the phrase that I love is be the change that you want to see in the world, right? There's an opportunity for you to enact that change somewhere in this crisis, somewhere in this moment of disruption. There's an opportunity. Even if you're a restaurant owner that has had to close your business, this is an opportunity to take a moment to say, I'm going to have the opportunity to reinvent. If I could reinvent, what would it look like? What's it going to be? So take that moment and think about what is the opportunity for you. And in doing so, it almost goes right back to where we started, which is about gratitude and what's going right and being prepared for the day when the world starts to normalize and you get to take advantage of some of the changes that have occurred. With that, I want to thank you for your time today. I look forward to your emails and your questions. And if there's any additional questions from the audience, Heather, I'm happy to take them.
It is a question. I don't know exactly if how you're going to answer it, though, so I'm curious. But the question is, how can I find opportunity when it just seems so bleak?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a real challenge right now is that it does seem bleak. I mean, particularly, you know, if you're here in Alaska, you know, we have very specific economic factors that are affecting us. Is that, you know, at some point the world is going to normalize and there's going to be new needs, there's going to be new opportunities. And so I would just ask yourself, like, when this is over, what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to have be there? And then, while that may seem very far off, then ask yourself this question: What's the step that I can take today to get ready for a better future? Maybe I watch a TED Talk. Maybe I read a book. Maybe I just sit down and list out what it is I want my world to look like, right? Just engaging in that exercise will make the world seem a little less bleak.
Interesting. Well, I wish I was as optimistic as you, but either way, I'm glad that I always have you in my back pocket for a resource, because you are indeed the epitome of optimism, and you are a breath of fresh air in times like these. So for the viewers out there who are watching live, we're wrapping up now. So if you want to watch this, or if you want to share it with somebody who might want to see it on playback, it'll be out on our website in 5 or so minutes. Feel free, if you are out on our website and you see what the programming is for the next month, and you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, just feel free to email me at info@thestrivegroup.com. I'm happy to go find an expert to address that topic in a 30-minute session. And if I can't find somebody, I know that my network of resources will help me find somebody to address the topic that you seek. If you have specific questions, if you see something in our programming that you're thinking is like, oh gosh, I do have a question about the Paycheck Protection Act, or I do have a question about business liability or a human resources topic or something like that, feel free to send a specific question, and what we'll do is we'll preload that into the session to make sure that the speaker, the expert of the day, addresses that during the 30-minute webinar. And of course, if it is a harder question to address in just a webinar or something, we'll just contact you directly and we'll get you into contact with that resource. So I urge everybody to find positivity in their day. Certainly Jonathan's session today gave us tools to do just that. And so I'll end it with just giving you some information about Jonathan. As I said, he is a resource to the Strive Group. I've known him for years, and he works with Halcyon Consulting. He is based here in Anchorage, Alaska. I have his services that he provides up on the slide, and in the lower right-hand side, you'll see his contact information. Feel free to call him, email him, or visit his website for more information. So Jonathan, I thank you very much for your time today. I know that our viewers appreciate it. I know we've got you on the schedule again within the next month, so I look forward to seeing you then. And then when you've got your last words, feel free to disable your camera and we'll tell everybody goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure being here with you today, and I wish you good luck, and stay resilient and stay focused.
Good advice. All right. Bye, everyone.